Huh. Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining me today.
I am really happy to be getting to talk with you again.
Yay. I know we spoke, gosh, I probably want to, it was probably like a year or two ago when we first spoke. And I'm so excited I get to speak to you again because you do have a class that's coming up that I think is going to be so helpful for a lot of people, especially in our community, the recovery community, who are really trying to redefine what their higher power means. A lot of people start with like this, maybe there is a higher power and it's an evolution process. We usually start with a little chink in the armor in the beginning and that evolves, but it's so nice to have a little help. So your class that's coming up is called the Spiritual Habits, and you do it both in group format and one-on-one. Is that right?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about the group one and how that works?
Yeah. I mean, the program broadly is combining two of my biggest sort of interest areas in life, which is one is behavior change science. How and why do people change? And then the other are these timeless spiritual principles that I feel like helped save my life in recovery. And so it was really bringing those two things together and really saying, all right, how do we live our beliefs more fully? We
Ooh,
may
that.
have these spiritual beliefs, but how do we do that? How do we integrate them more fully into life? And a big problem is just forgetting, right? Big problem is just we just don't remember. We get busy, we
Yeah.
start in the morning and we go, 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 go. And maybe if we've developed a morning meditation practice, which even for a lot of people is a stretch and hard to do,
Yeah.
um, even if we've got that, that may be the last time we think about any of these ideas until maybe we're going to bed, and maybe not even then. But some people do like a formal 10th step at the end of the night. And then you're like, oh gosh, I didn't think about any of that stuff for the entire day. So we're trying to figure out how to weave
Mm.
it through. And then the group part of it is, we meet once a week on Sundays as a group, and the groups it's a pretty good sized group. I mean, last time it was 100 people. I don't know what it'll be this time. But the really cool thing we do is we divide that 100-person group up into smaller groups or 5 or 6 people. And those people meet on Wednesdays and they talk about what the practices are for the week and how those practices are going. Anybody who's been part of, recovery groups will understand the power of a small group of people talking about what you're trying to work on. And so that's the part of the program I'm really probably most excited about is, and a lot of those small groups that start meeting in the program are still meeting together. A couple of them have been going on for like 2 years. They just keep meeting with each other. Like
Oh,
they
I
form
love
these little
that.
friendships and they've carried on because I've been for so many years with this podcast, I've been like, how can I get the people who are listeners to this show to know and support each other? Because I know that they could and they would. And so I finally feel like we're starting to kind of crack that code, and I'm really excited about it.
That's amazing. It's so interesting, in the religious, I grew up super churched. So there was the there was the service on Sundays, and then I grew up like Southern Baptist, and so it was a whole lot of church Sunday in the morning and then the evening and then on Wednesday, and it was a whole thing. But the idea of the small group, I was very familiar with that. And then when I got sober, I would go to these big meetings and you get these big speakers that were just amazing that would rock your world. But it was so important to have like your little mini support
Mhm.
group, right? Your
Yeah,
ride or dies, the people that, 5 or 6 friends that you could call day or night, no matter what, and who could call you day or night. That intimate support group is so vital, I think, to feeling connected.
absolutely. It is so important is to find those people that, yeah, we can share with and rely on and be more intimate with.
Yeah, get real. That's amazing. And then you do the spiritual habits one-on-one. Is the one-on-one so that as people walk through their lives and they bump up against different search situations, they can bring it to you and you can work it through, like you examine the thought process and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, by its nature, you hear it's one-on-one, so it's working directly with me. Whereas, in the spiritual habits group program, it's maybe me to 100 people, and then they
Hmm.
meet. This is me one-on-one with someone. And yeah, we're still covering the same ground, but
Hmm.
we're moving a little bit more slowly through the material, and we're
Hmm.
really talking very much about integration and what works with this, these practices you're trying. Is it working? Is it not working? Oh yeah, it works really well in this situation, but I just, when it comes to this, I'm stuck.
Right. Yeah.
And so
That
we can process it more. I mean, the whole part of the program is to really bridge the gap between knowing and doing. you
you are
know
speaking my language. It's not enough to know how,
yeah,
like what it's important to know. It's applying the information. That's the tricky part.
yeah. And I came up in a 12-step tradition, and there was a way to apply what you were learning.
Hmm.
You could work the steps. I mean, there was something to at least do. There was
To do.
some coherence to what you could do. And so much of what we learn has no scaffolding to hang it on.
Right. This is true.
So that's part of what, we're trying to do in the program, is actually kind of slow down and say, all right, there are, X number of fundamental principles that show up through all spiritual traditions, all religious traditions, frankly, all most philosophical traditions. They're things that most everybody would go, yeah, I agree with that. That's true. Yes.
Hmm.
And, but okay, that's great. How do we actually live it?
Exactly. Um, I love that you're combining science and spiritual principles. Are you familiar with Joe Dispenza's work at all?
A little bit, not a lot.
Yeah,
A little
it's
bit.
just, he said something a lot about how science is explaining the mystical now, right? Like through things like quantum physics and neuroscience and things like that, we're really getting a sense of why and how the spiritual principles work. And I really love that combination between science and spirituality. When it comes to behavior change, are you incorporating the application of things like 12 steps into the program, or how does that work?
Not directly. I'm more incorporating um, the science of behavior change, kind of what we know about how people change, what we know about habit creation, what we know, and when I say what we know, I mean, we've interviewed a lot of, the leading experts in the world on this. I've
Mhm.
got 25 years of, my own changes, recovery being a big one, but all kinds of other ones. And now I've got experience coaching hundreds of people from around the world. So it's sort of distilling all that down to like,
Right.
what do we kind of know about how people change? And let's take that and then say, can we look through that lens and say, all right, well, how can we then practice these principles more using that? So that's really where the science comes together with the spirituality. It's the science of behavior change,
Mhm.
habit creation,
Habit
trying to
creation.
create what I call spiritual habits, a way of practicing our spirituality in a more habitual fashion. And by habitual, I mean consistent fashion.
Right.
Not the mindless idea of habit, like you just do it without ever thinking about it, but more the consistent application.
Consistent mindful practice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
One of the things in the program we talk about is developing what I call still points. And still points are just moments throughout the day that you can pause and do something. And by do
Mm.
something, the best way to think of it is, I think of a still point as like a container. If I can get these containers sort of, stitched into my day, then I can choose what I want to put in that container. Oh, I'm really focused on being present this week. That's the principle we're working on. I've got these still points. So what I'll do at my still point is I'll just, ground myself in my senses and, look, what are 5 things I can see? What are 5 things I can hear? Right? Come back to the present, because our senses are the portal to now. And so that's one example of something we could do in a still point. But once you have these, you have a lot of You can almost think of them like if you were running a race, it's really helpful to have water stations along the way.
Mm.
A lot of us might start off, and again, maybe we've got a morning meditation practice. And again, a lot of people don't have that. We do work on developing that in the program. But even if you do, it may be a long stretch of time till, like we said, till you reflect again. The still points are sort of like water stops along the way that allow you to refuel a little bit. One of the mantras we use in the program over and over, the core ideas, is that little by little, a little becomes a lot. So if we take these small glimpses over and over and over and over again, because that's what most of us get and have. If you're spiritually committed and focused and you really want to grow in that area, you could go off and join a monastery or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that would allow you to just devote all your time to it. For most people, they're not going to do that. So what they've got is a busy life. And yet I still want to grow spiritually. So what we have in a busy life are moments, and we have to start to use those moments better.
Mm. Yeah, what's interesting is I had a friend who suffered a loss. His girlfriend passed away, and he was like, "I'm never going to be happy again." Or like, I cannot be happy. At first, it seemed, I think for him, it felt like a betrayal to be happy, right? That
Mhm.
it was not like he wasn't, if he was, had moments of happiness, it would be a betrayal. But I came back to this idea of just moments. Like, you might be grieving, but you also might have moments of joy, like maybe when you remember her and all the good things, right? Moments of joy when we don't attach the next thought, which is in the future, which is then, oh, I'm never going to have that again. Right.
Absolutely. And I mean, a spiritual principle is impermanence, right? Which means that things are
Mm,
always changing. And
right.
so even in an experience that seems like as solid and heavy as grief, and it is, there are also, as you're saying, there are moments where that's not what's happening. And so
Right.
we can, if we can learn to if we can learn to see the way that not all moments are the same. You might say, I'm depressed, but are you depressed all day, every day? Of course not. There
Right.
are moments in there that you
Moments.
feel better. And so, yeah, I think that's a great analogy.
Yeah, I have this thing called a 5 minute journal, and it says, "What would make today great?" Are you familiar with the 5 minute journal? Oh my
Mhm.
God, it's so good. Um, and it's what would make today great. And sometimes it's recognize moments of peace,
Yeah,
which is hard to do because I write it down in my journal and I go, "That's awesome." And then I set it down and I don't think about it till it's time to write the evening part, like you said.
that's right. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So these still points, are you having people set their timers on their phones or
We explore different methods. I mean, an idea from behavior change is using triggers. And
triggers?
I
Yeah.
mean it differently than we mean it in
I know.
recovery.
We think
Although,
trigger to drink or
yeah,
use.
although that does fit within this framework.
Yeah.
But a trigger is basically, yes, something that reminds us to do something or causes us to do something. And so if we're trying to do more of something positive and the problem is forgetting, we need to remember more. So there
Oh,
are
yeah.
different types of triggers. There are time-based triggers. Like you said, I get to set an alarm on my phone to go off 4 times a day. And when it does, I'll say a short prayer. That's
Okay.
one way. The other are location-based triggers. Something like
Uh-huh.
every time I go in the kitchen, every
Okay.
time I go to the bathroom, like that's a it's sort of an event slash location trigger, but
Yeah.
there are transitions that are natural in our day that if we can learn to use, we can
Oh, so
use
smart.
other triggers that are like after I walk the dog, or
Uh-huh.
after I make a cup of coffee, or every time I refill my water bottle, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? It's tying, it's anchoring it to something you already do.
Right. That's sort of like the tiny habits. Is that BJ Fogg?
Mhm. Yeah.
Habit stacking or something?
Yeah, it is very similar to the idea of habit stacking. Absolutely.
Habit stacking.
It's yeah. If you've got something you're already doing, then you can sort of anchor another habit to it. You can say, and it can be anything. Like I said, if you've got dogs, you take your dog out X number of times a day. You do it every day, ideally at similar times. It's an event that you could anchor something to. After I
Yeah.
take the dogs out, I will X. So
Right.
there's that type of trigger. Then there is we explore random triggers, which are, yeah, using technology like your phone and a couple of different apps that are out there that will randomly go off. So it's not, and when they go off, it's just a moment. You go, okay, let me try and do my little practice here. Now, sometimes when a random trigger goes off, you just can't do it. Like if my trigger went off right now, I'd be like, well, I'm going to have to ignore it because I'm in the middle of a podcast conversation, right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't always work.
Because I'd be all rude.
That would be totally, um, and then it would not make for a good podcast if I
No.
said 5 minutes. But that is another way. And then the last type, and it's a really powerful type, is trigger in what we're used to, which I would say is an emotional based trigger.
Okay.
And a lot of us, these are negative and they're unconscious. I feel
Right.
sad, so I eat. I feel nervous, so I get on my phone and I get on Facebook.
Right.
We can all talk. I mean, we can, in active addiction, there's lots of these, right? I mean,
Sure.
almost everything could be a trigger, but
Sure.
they're so. But these are the most powerful types of triggers to learn to reuse. If we can
Okay.
start to notice our internal state more often, then we can say, oh, when I'm tense, I will do X. When I'm feeling sad, I will do Y. We start to take those internal triggers that are happening sort of semi-consciously now, and we can be more conscious about them. This takes developing interior, sort of a more consistent interior awareness, which is a lot of work to develop. But once you have it, it's incredibly valuable. And most people will find on their sobriety journey that or even not on any of healing journey,
Any human journey.
you start to get better at this when you're paying attention, because you start to actually
Mm.
go, I feel better more of the time. So when I feel bad, it
Oh,
can be it can
it's
be
more.
a trigger. Yeah,
Yeah.
but not a trigger in a bad way, a trigger in a good way, like, oh, here's what I'm
Ah,
feeling. Oh, okay, now here's what I want to do when I feel that. When I feel that way, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths and remember one thing I'm grateful for. I mean, we could do 1,000 different things, but that's an example of using sort of behavior change science, which talks about something called a habit loop. And a habit loop is, you get a trigger of some sort, a stimulus of some sort, and then there's a response that you're doing because you're seeking a certain reward.
yeah.
The way to rewire that is the trigger is still going to be there. You're still going to want the same reward by and large.
Right.
You just have to change the thing in the middle.
Got it.
Like, because if I get stressed, I'm still going to want to feel less stressed. That's just natural and inborn. Now, I
Right.
may become less frantic in needing to feel less stressed, right? I may be able to go like, oh, I'm stressed. All right, I can hang out with that. That's a great skill. But I'm also am going to naturally go, well, I want to change that. So, and I may change it right now in all sorts of unhelpful coping patterns. So how do we insert one that's better? So that's an example of sort of using behavior change science to try and anchor some of these spiritual principles.
Yeah, I have so many questions. I think that's so interesting, the idea of sort of noticing, because I think what most people do is their repetitive, like default mode network, their repetitive brain patterns are like, you make a mistake and you're like, oh, I'm such an idiot.
Mhm.
Or you feel bad and you go, oh God, I can't believe I did that again. I'm so stupid. That kind of thing. It's so knee jerk and visceral and it happens so fast. It's hard to notice and catch. And so, just a brief little solution of 3 deep breaths. Remember something that you're grateful for. Like, what a simple but effective alternative response.
Totally. Yeah. And we want to, oftentimes that's what we need, right? We need, like, I remember early in recovery, it was like, if you want to drink, call your sponsor.
Right.
Like, it was, I needed that instead of like, God, I want to drink. What should I do? Because what happens when we're emotionally activated
Yeah.
is that the thinking parts of our brain just don't work as well. So we're like, I know I have all kinds of, I know I should respond to this in a different, better way, but for the life of me, I can't think of how.
Can't remember.
So
Can't
we,
remember.
yeah, so we want to make it simple. We want to make it simple. And
And
so,
you condition and condition, like what you're
yeah,
talking about,
over
these
and over.
moments is conditioning, which is something that's super up for me right now. I'm working with these women who have, there's like, have you ever heard of EMDR, eye movement
Yep.
desensitization reprocessing? Those are good for situational things, but people like us who had repetitive, persistent, ongoing
Yes.
negative conditioning, we need something just like what you're talking about to recondition, because people think of the mind as being in the skull. But what's true is that, I mean, that is true, but our entire, there's the spinal cord, and the spinal cord has nerves that
Yep.
cover every square inch of our body. And so the body's like the unconscious mind. And so the unconscious mind is as conditioned as the conscious mind or the subconscious mind. So it all, this conditioning that it's kind of how I think of it as you were saying this, that was coming up for me, is that it's conditioning. It's like reconditioning, reprogramming. And these are so practical, such practical advice. When you mentioned random triggers and having some apps, I was curious about the apps, but even more so, you said that it would prompt you to do the practice.
Mhm.
And so what are some examples of the practice? I think you mentioned prayer. Do you have specific prayers, or what is the
No, I don't. I
practice?
don't have. It depends what week we're on in the program.
Oh,
So
okay.
each week in the
How many
program,
weeks?
it's an 8-week
8
program,
weeks.
although the
Okay,
last
sorry.
week is sort of a recap. So there are seven there are seven core spiritual principles that I marry with behavior change principles. The behavior change principles sort of underlie the whole thing. And then each week we're working on a different spiritual principle. So,
Awesome.
if we're on the week that we're talking about presence, then all of our still points in our noticing and our reactions are going to be, how do I bring myself here to this moment as clearly as I can? So I gave you one example, which is just a classic sort of ground yourself in your senses. Because
Mhm.
part of the thing, a lot of us are like, well, I want to be present. What is that? How on earth do I even do that? But, like for me, for a long time, I'd be like, all right, come to the present moment. And I would be there for a split second before I was gone again,
Yeah,
you
for
know?
how long?
And so things like grounding ourselves in our senses, what are 5 things I can see right now? It gives my brain just enough to do that it sticks around, but it's still present. It's
Yeah.
not thinking, but I've given it a little bit of a task. Another example would be like, look around your environment and see everything you can see that's red. What we've done now is you're present, you're looking, because what else is being present except being awake to your senses? That's what it is.
Right. Yeah.
So we find ways to use little things like that to keep us closer. So on another week, if what we're looking at is learning to drop the resistance to things in our life,
Ooh, that's a big one.
right?
Drop resistance
Yeah. Then
to
I mean, we spend a whole module is on dropping the resistance in general.
in
Um,
general.
Now, of course, you always got to run that through. I think I always run it through the serenity prayer, right? Like if I can change it and it needs change, that's probably where my effort should go. But if I
So
can't
practical.
change it, or I'm not going to change it, as in like I've decided I'm going to do this thing because it aligns with my values. I'll give you an example.
Oh yeah.
My partner Ginny's mom has Alzheimer's. And so for three and a
Mm.
half years, every month we go to Atlanta for a couple weeks to be with her. And then we schlep back to Columbus for a couple weeks to be with my mom, who's not in great shape either. every month, back and forth, 3.5 years. It's like a 9-hour drive.
Oh dear.
And so we've decided this is what we're doing. It aligns with what we believe is important. It aligns with our values. We don't see a better plan. So, but I will find myself starting to be like say we were going to Atlanta in 3 days. I'll find myself starting to be like, I don't want to go. Like, this is such a pain. Why do we have to, like, this is, my brother's not doing this. Like, I mean, all this stuff is resistance. I'm going to go, right? Like, I've already decided I'm going. So all that resistance just causes me to suffer.
Oh, yeah.
And if we start looking in life, we might start to see this everywhere. Oh, it's time to exercise in the morning, and yet I'm resisting it. I've got these things I need to do at work, and yet I'm resisting them. There's an equation that we use that comes from a mindfulness teacher, and the equation is suffering equals pain times resistance. And so if you take, let's just like, we'll pretend it's an actual equation, like mathematically. Let's just say that having to go to Atlanta is on a pain level of 3 out of 10. Let's just pretend. If I resist it at a level of like 5 points of resistance, I now have 15 total points of suffering, right? If I were able to turn that resistance down, let's just say I turned it down from a 5 to a 3. Now I have 9 points of total suffering, and I didn't have to change the event itself at all. You can apply this to physical pain in the body. Yes. You'll notice that part of physical pain is a sensation. It's unpleasant, but then all kinds of stuff arises out of that. I shouldn't be feeling this way. Why me?
How long?
If I feel like it's at 50, what will I be like at 70? Right. All that stuff. If we can turn that down, we turn down our suffering without ever moving the pain. Now, again, if you can fix the pain, fix it. Right. But lots of times things in life we either can't change, or like in the example of what I'm talking about with the way we travel to see our mothers, we're not going to change because it aligns with our values. Right. And so if we can turn down the resistance on that, we just suffer less.
Okay, that's interesting. Resistance. I think of resistance sometimes, and like, I want to attract good things into my life, right? Attraction and manifestation and all that stuff. What I feel is resistance is my internal judgment, either about what I think I deserve or being worthy. That's like a core belief that creates resistance. It sounds like that would work for this too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, resistance shows up lots of different ways. Yeah. And it's usually, it's almost always in the mind.
Always.
Right. It's almost always in the mind.
Yeah.
And it's almost always about something that just
is not actually happening.
Not happening. Or exactly that whole story about Atlanta, right? Like, yeah. I'm not going to Atlanta for 4 more days.
Yeah. And you could spend 4 days suffering.
4 days being like, why do I have to? This sucks, like, yeah. I mean, on one level, objectively, like, yeah, it kind of does in some ways, yeah. But I can minimize how much that is. And the same way we can all minimize the sort of pain we have in life. It's not to say that pain isn't real.
Right.
Because it is. But we will almost always find that in addition to pain, we are amplifying and making things worse by all the mental projections, fabrications, just all the spinning of the mind, which is usually, I would just roughly categorize as resistance.
Yeah. And, you're familiar with that term, what we resist persist,
yes.
And I like the idea that you said that we're not trying to pretend like it's not there, because pretending that it's not there is resisting the feeling, right? Yeah. So you acknowledge, I don't feel like going, but you acknowledge it, you feel it, you recognize it for what it is, you come back to the present moment, and that's where you find peace and minimize that pain.
Yeah. And what we find really is that all these spiritual habits sort of work in tandem. They're different
Yeah.
facets of each other. So the answer isn't always don't resist anything. That's not it,
Oh, right.
right? Like, there are times for, there are times for allowing yourself to feel what you feel and feel it deeply. And
Yeah.
then there are times also for saying, you know what? I'm not going to go down that path right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yes.
I'm not going to engage those thoughts because they're destructive.
Yeah.
Right? So this stuff is like, as a recent teacher I interviewed says, it's kind of like riding a bike. Knowing what to do when is it's definitely an art. But what we want to give is a sort of a suite of tools and habits that sort of can anchor people together, that they can use.
Yeah, but you're also creating those small groups, which is that you can bounce stuff off. This is why we need each other, because we can't all remember everything right when we need to, right? And so that's why we need each other, is because when I'm crazy, you can just be like, hey, don't forget about this. I'll be like, oh, that's right. Thank you so much. And then we're like friends forever. you know?
Absolutely. And like we learned in 12-step programs, me reminding you of those things helps me as much as it helps you.
100%.
Right. So we're in these small groups and we're sharing back and forth. It might be me this week reminding you, and next week
Yeah.
it's you reminding me, but
Right.
it's always a reciprocal relationship. That's the beauty of peer support.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, because it works like that. And so that's what the program does, is it gives people a common language to talk
Yeah.
in the same way that's what recovery in AA for me, we had a common language. So we
Right.
were able to talk in a way. And so with the spiritual habits program, people have a common language. And so they
Yeah.
can, so these groups that have been meeting for, a long time together will just say, well, think about the middle way for that. And everybody will know, well, oh, here's what the middle way means. Here's all the different,
What does a middle way mean?
it means avoid. I mean, in its essence, it means avoiding the extremes, avoiding all or
Oh,
nothing thinking, you know,
yeah.
um, avoiding, yeah. There's a lot of ways that we tend to end up at one extreme or the other, Now, some things we need to be that way. Like for me in recovery, like the middle way doesn't work. I can't,
You
right?
don't drink in moderation? No heroin in moderation?
If I could, I would, but I
I
can't. So,
always tell people if I could smoke weed, I'd do it every day.
exactly. It is still how I feel,
I
100%.
know. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so this isn't everything, but an example,
Mm.
sort of a simple example, but a lot of people will relate with this. Let's say you're trying to eat better, and you got a plan of what you're allowed to eat and not eat, and you go out to lunch with friends or coworkers and you eat all kinds of crap. Most people's reaction is, well, I screwed up, F it.
Yeah, right.
Right? The rest of the day is off the rails. I might be off the rails entirely on the program. I might just give up, right? Versus the
Right.
middle way approach would say, well, I'm not going to do it perfectly.
Right.
So, yeah, I messed up at lunch. All right, back on track
Wow.
for dinner.
I just felt
Not,
like a sense of relief when you said that. It's like, oh, that's right. I don't have to do that perfectly.
yeah.
What a sense of relief.
Yeah. So there's so many. I mean, in the program, we might go through 15 different ways of applying the middle way in different scenarios and
Got
situations
it.
in our lives. Like we might look at personality traits, and say, well, they're usually best in sort of a middle ground. Like we might say,
Mm.
something, a virtue like courage is a
Mm.
middle ground between being chicken and being an idiot, right? Like if you have no fear
Yeah.
of anything, you act like I mean, you just, and on the other hand, you're afraid of everything. Courage is a nice blend in between.
Mm.
We talk about being assertive. Assertive is sort of between passive and aggressive. It's not aggressive, but it's also not passive.
Right.
So lots of things fall into this. And then there
Middle
are
way.
times where we hold the middle by holding, you know, potentially contradictory extremes also, right? We hold two
Yes.
ideas at the same time that
Is that
seem like they
the
don't relate.
cognitive dissonance where you're holding two ideas at the
Yeah.
same time?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a funny world we live in. This whole recovery thing. It's tricky. I think
Yes.
that's why it's so important to have people and a process. Um, Can we go over real quick the 7 lessons? Is it lessons, like weekly lessons or principles, you said?
I refer to them as principles, probably
Principles.
more than lessons.
Yeah.
Although you could think of them that way. But sure, we
Not
can.
mutually exclusive, right?
Yeah, no, not mutually exclusive at all.
Mhm.
So yeah, we could walk through them real quick. The first is intention and attention. And in this case, by intention, I mean a little bit less like intention of what I'm going to attract to me. And I mean a little bit more of it in the sense of who do I want to be?
Ooh, that's good.
What, who's the, what, it's a, to me, it's a way of asking about life in general, but also individual situation. What's important about this and how do I want to show up?
Oh yeah. We're trying to evolve into our future self and to be intentional
Yeah.
about that. Like, Arlena 3 years from now, it's like, what would she do? What does she think? How would she respond to this
Yeah.
situation?
That's a
Yeah.
beautiful, but it can be even as simple as I'm about to have dinner with my wife. What's important about this?
Mm.
Oh, I want to connect with my wife. I want to be
Oh,
present for dinner.
I can see how your still moments all I can see how it all works together now.
Yeah. And the second part
Still
of that
points,
is
sorry.
attention. Where is my
Attention.
attention? So obviously the quality of our life is directly, I mean, where our attention is determines the quality of our life. What am I
What's that?
paying attention
Yeah.
to?
Energy flows where attention goes.
Yes, yeah,
I
I think it's exactly it. And
love
and
that.
not to make a word soup out of it, but is my attention in line with my intention? So let's just go back to I'm going to have dinner with my wife and I decide ahead of time, I want to be present and connected.
Mhm.
And I'm sitting there at dinner and I realize, where's my attention? Oh, I'm thinking about the last call I had.
Mhm.
Something that didn't go right. Well,
Ah,
okay, now my attention is not where my intention wants to be. So can I bring them closer together?
mm. Closer, not
Yeah.
perfect.
No, no. Which
That sounds very gentle.
leads us perfectly to principle number 2, which is self-compassion. Because what we don't want to do is turn all this work into another way to feel bad about ourselves.
No, right? Like my morning practice, I was like, oh crap, I'm supposed to pray, meditate, journal, do a call, take a picture, post it. Oh my God. And then I'm like, fuck it. I
Yeah,
can't do it.
yeah,
Ruined. My days are ruined.
exactly. There's the
The
middle way. There's the middle way. Ruin.
need for the middle. I'm gonna have to take your class.
Ruin is a classic example of not being in the middle way, because short of like dropping your phone in the washer, most things aren't really ruined. Your day's not ruined,
Right.
but that's the kind of terminology we use. I mean, extreme,
Fatalistic mentality.
yeah, that extreme language creates extreme feelings.
Oh yeah.
So but staying in order here,
Okay.
self-compassion. How
Self-compassion.
do we relate to ourselves with kindness regardless of how well we quote unquote perform?
Relate to self. Have you interviewed Tara Brock yet?
We've had Tara Brock on, and we've also had the woman who really pioneered self-compassion research, Kristen Neff. We've had her on a couple times.
Oh, I do a morning group meditation with a bunch of gals, and we do the Tara Brock rain meditation. You know why
Yeah.
I did it in a group? Because I will do for others what I won't do for myself. So I established a meditation group
Oh,
so to force myself to show up.
very wise. That is a wise application of behavioral principles.
Yeah, and we do the
That's,
Tara Brock
yeah.
meditation. I love it.
Yeah. She's an
Dang.
outstanding teacher.
Yeah.
She is a particularly gifted teacher for
I
sure.
do that. Have you done the one on YouTube that's 11 minutes and 31 seconds approximately?
Uh, my partner Ginny loves Tara Brach, and we've
Oh,
done a lot of Tara Brach meditation. So I would
you
guess
probably did.
at a certain point they all start to sound the same. That's not
Do
bad.
they?
That is not
No,
a
no, no.
knock. Like meditation shouldn't be constantly like, well, let's drop this exciting thing in, right? Like you're
So
trying to
exciting.
settle and deepen quality. So of course they're very similar. I don't mean that as a
No, no,
negative.
no, of course
At a
not. No,
certain
I
point,
didn't
you're
take it.
like,
That. Yeah.
I could probably do a Tara Brach guided meditation for you right now, like
Oh,
Notice
tempting.
your shoulders. Let them move from ice to water, water to gas. If you've ever heard her do that, it's a
I
very
have
common
not.
one of hers. Anyway, she's amazing.
Okay,
Um,
I'm gonna look for that one.
self-compassion.
Okay,
After
self-compassion.
self-compassion is a lesson I call No Ordinary Moments. And it's about
Mm,
being present, but I call it No Ordinary Moments because really life is simply a series of moments.
mm-hmm.
That's all it is. And most of us are always on our way somewhere else. It's like when I want to get to that moment, I want to get to that moment, I want to get to that moment. The problem is when we get to that moment, we have
Just
no capacity to inhabit it. So we're off.
oh,
So we have to. I mean, I used to do this
oh.
all the time. I'd go on vacation and I'd get to the ocean. We've been waiting to get here for weeks, and there's like 2 minutes where it's like just glorious, and then my brain goes,
What's next?
no, my brain. Usually, what my brain does is it tries to capture more of it. It's like, what if we bought a place here at the ocean? You need a house at the ocean.
Let's
I
live
should come
here.
here more often. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, well, how much money that would? I mean, I'm gone. you know so No Ordinary Moments is a reminder to us, pay attention to to what we would call ordinary moments. But
Inhabit.
and that this is straight out of my Zen practice. I mean, Zen is fanatical about this point, about right here, right now.
Right now.
Now, boom, over again, 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 now, now, now. Pay attention. And what we can learn is to pay attention. When we learn to pay attention more deeply and differently, more moments of life we go, oh, there is more going on here than I thought.
Mm, always. Yeah.
We learn to see like an artist and hear like a musician, and all those things bring more of our ordinary, what we would call an ordinary moment to life. So that's that module. The module after that is called Allow Everything to Be Exactly the Way It Is. This is the resistance module.
Oh,
And again,
okay.
I'm going to, that's what I call it, but I would say serenity prayer has to be applied here, right? Like, I'm not saying you never change anything in life, but it's really about looking at where are we resisting things in life that's not serving us. Some type of resistance is noble, right? We see people
Oh,
resisting
sure.
in the world against oppression. That's not what I'm talking about.
All right.
Like, I'm talking about the sort of internal resistance that we do to things in life that just
Oh man.
doesn't do us any good.
Yeah, like it shouldn't be like this.
That's the classic.
It shouldn't
That's
be
the
this way,
classic. Yes.
but
Yep.
it is this way. So
That
to deny reality is insanity.
it's to suffer.
It's to suffer.
It's to suffer,
It's to suffer.
and really, yeah, what that idea of there's a old psychotherapist by the name of Albert Ellis. You may have heard of him, and he was kind of known for his wild methods. And he had a term that I hope is not going to be too blue for this show, but he called it masturbation. And
It's
masturbation,
blue like dirty.
yeah, yeah. Um,
No.
masturbation just meant this constant saying things must be this way.
That's so
And if we can
funny.
just relax that a little bit, like, not, of course we have preferences, but when we go from it's got to be this way, it shouldn't be this way,
Oh,
it should be, to
that hard edge.
I would prefer it be this way, that's a real softening.
Mm,
So that's the resistance module. The next module is called We Don't See the World as It Is, We See It as We Are. It's about the fact that we are always, in every moment, seeing life through lenses, through filters, through our own conditioning. We can't not.
mhm.
Some people might say that true enlightenment, would be seen with no filters. We could debate that for 30 minutes. It's esoteric, but by and large, we're always seen through some lens. So can we learn to be more flexible?
Flexible.
Can we learn to try on different ones? Well, it seems to me that this is what it is. But what if I looked at it this way? Or what if I thought of it that way? Or what if and this in general, the main lesson is, when in doubt, zoom out, which means
Ooh.
take a bigger perspective. Like, if I'm really stuck on something, like, ask myself, is this going to matter in 5 days? Like, take a broader time perspective. There's
Oh,
lots of ways of zooming our perspective out, but usually what's causing us to be, when we talk about making a mountain out of a molehill, the way you do that is you just get really close to a molehill, like, so it's right there and it's all you see. It looks like a mountain.
yes.
You stand up and you're like, oh, it's just a little molehill. So that's perspective.
Perspective.
The next lesson we have already talked about, which is the middle way,
Okay.
avoiding all or nothing thinking. We explore some of what I just said around, like, what are we saying to ourselves? What's the language we're using internally? Because again, that extreme language creates extreme emotions. I used to say, I would catch myself saying, my back is killing me.
I think everyone says that. I'm
And,
dying.
and then I check in and I'm like, well, yeah, I got a little twinge back there. Like, so extreme language, not to
I used to say
throw
that
out.
when I was at work. I'd be on a business call and be like, oh my God, I'm dying.
Exactly. Yes. I'm dying.
Dying.
The other one I love is, I can't stand this. I'm like, well, you kind of are standing it, right? Right as you
No, no,
actually
you're kind of
are,
doing it.
you know. And then the last one is generosity. It's about how can we learn to live with a more open, giving heart. It doesn't just mean giving possessions, but what are all the ways that we can give? And this is going to be, people in 12-step programs are going to recognize this as the 12th step,
Yeah.
like, carry the message to, it's, where can I be of service? How can I
Yeah.
help? So we just explored generosity through a lot of different lenses. So those are the principles that underlie it. And then, or those are each of the weak principles. And then, sort of underlying all of it, we're trying to take what we know about behavior change and saying, how can we live more of these things? But
How can
hopefully
we?
there was enough in there that, as I was just talking, that's helpful for people, even if they
Oh
decide
my
they don't want
goodness.
to do the
Yeah.
program. There was benefit in there.
Oh, for sure. No, I
Don't
mean,
want it to be a giant commercial.
it's not really. No, I mean, I want to take the class now. It's weekly. What day of the week? What day of the week
Uh,
is it?
yeah, the main group meets on Sundays,
Oh, that's right. You said the weekend,
Sundays at
Sundays.
noon Eastern time. And then the small groups meet on Wednesday evening, usually at 7 p.m. in the person's local time zone. So I divide people up by
Oh,
where they actually are located. So we've got,
right.
like, a European group that we group together, and, we've got
Oh,
lots of East and West Coast and some people in between. We try and get people into their time zone.
oh,
And
that's
some
great.
people will be like, well, you know what? I'm on Eastern, but put me in the Western time zone group because that works better for me. So we've got some flexibility with that, but it's Sundays and Wednesdays. And
What if you don't like your group? Does that ever happen? Or everyone says Zen from because they're practicing these principles, everyone gets along?
I haven't had, I don't like my group. We have had a couple things where, like, if you put five, let's say we've got 5 people in a group, and let's say 3 of them end up being flakes,
Oh, you have to
then
rehome some people.
sometimes, yeah, yes, we have to rehome people. Although what's been fascinating is that some of these groups that end up being 2 people, like, become best friends. Like,
Oh,
so there's benefit. But no, I've honestly not had, like, this group doesn't work, I don't
I'm
like it.
so mean. I always say a worst case scenario. See what I did
um
there? I need your class.
yeah. But yeah, we're doing a webinar on September 26th that I'm just saying, learn the number one daily spiritual habit to help you feel more peace in your life. And
Mhm.
so I'll just be doing a little teaching to give people a chance to get a sense of what I teach, how I teach it, what it's like. Um,
Yeah.
and so people can go to oneyoufeed.net/live and sign up for that if they want, and you'll get the recording if you can't attend. And
Okay.
no, it's not a high pressure
No,
sale
no,
kind
no.
of thing.
I don't. I get the sense you're not a high pressure sales
I
guy.
don't have it in me. I just don't have it in me. I
I
mean,
know.
I've evolved to realize, like, you've got to market, like, you
I
need to say
know.
things like, learn the number one daily habit. Like, you got to give things a little zing,
I
a little
know.
zest. But as far as pressuring or pushing people,
It's so gross.
I could not do it.
I couldn't if I wanted. No, I totally get that. And also, if people want to get to know you better, I I love your podcast, the one you feed. I don't know. I don't think I even told you. So when I got your email, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe he emailed me, because just the day before, I didn't tell you this in the email today, just the day before, I was adding your podcast as a resource to, I'm starting this membership site called the Brainwashers Club. It's sort of like ongoing mental. Yeah, I thought it was funny.
It's good. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was listening to your podcast as a resource. And then
Yeah.
I got your email the very next day.
That's
And then
funny.
I was like, oh, it's so good to talk to you. Can you introduce me to this lady? And then you introduced me to Judith. And now we're like best friends. She's going to be on my podcast, but she's like a kindred spirit. She's amazing.
She's lovely. She really
Oh,
is. She's
and
just
I
wonderful.
told my husband, I go, this is how the universe works, right? Like you think about somebody, you like don't attach to it. You just, I wasn't, it was just the weirdest thing. It was so cool.
Well, it's perfect timing, and
I
I was
know.
so excited you were able to fit me in also.
Oh, hell yeah. I was like, I have to bump some people, but that's my boy, Eric. Yeah, no, this is so good. This is so good. I'm so excited for your class. This is really, I
Yeah,
mean,
I
it's all
love
about, I'm obsessed with how do we apply? How do we
it too.
apply
Me
the
too. It's
information?
my obsession. It really is.
Yeah, how do we apply? It's not enough to know. We need to know
Yeah,
how.
yeah, and I am very proud of the program. I really do love it.
I
And
see
I mean,
it.
and I
Yeah.
get such great feedback from people. I mean, that's
Oh,
you do something and you're like, well, is it good? I don't know if it's good. I mean, I think it's good, but and then you just hear people,
yeah.
and we've run 3 cohorts of people through it at this point. So got
Wow.
3 cohorts of people saying like, yeah, this was really great. So it just, you know what it's like. It just feels good to be doing something positive in the world.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's something magical about fulfilling your purpose.
Yeah,
It's clear that this is your purpose. And I think it attracts, from that heart center, the right people who, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, but it works the other way too. When the teacher is ready, the student appears as well.
mm,
And
I
so
love
you
that.
had, listen, you
That's
had to do,
wonderful.
isn't that good?
Yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciate people who do their own work. Like I've interviewed people where I'm like, you haven't done your work.
Yeah.
You can feel the difference. So you've
Totally.
clearly done all your own work because you can't transmit something you don't have.
Yeah, and still am, of course. I
Of
mean,
course, of
like,
course.
I've been practicing in the Zen tradition for the last few years, and I'm sort of perhaps exploring a couple other routes to go. So I'm talking to different spiritual teachers and
Oh,
sort of
like what?
well, probably still in the Buddhist meditative tradition, but I'm interested a little bit more in deepening insight practices where
Mm.
via concentration we're able to look more closely at questions of emptiness or non-self or impermanence. We're able to see that stuff more and more. And I've had a couple of really major sort of spiritual openings and awakenings, and I want to follow where those pointed.
Yeah, that's good. Those are kind of hard to come by once you've been sober and seeking for so long. I mean, because after kind of a while, you kind of touched on all the things, right? So
Totally.
it's,
Well,
yeah.
these to me have been like sobriety was so much about working with my personality structure,
Yeah.
working with this version of Eric that, has all these conditions and all these different things. My spiritual awakenings have been more about a level behind that
Yeah.
aren't, they have nothing to do with they have nothing to do with my personality structure. There aren't issues to be unearthed. These are really where that lesson of allow everything to be exactly the way it is kind of comes out of that, because when I've had my most profound awakenings is when I've been somehow able to completely take my hands off the dials of trying to change anything about my experience. We're always doing it very subtly. It's
I
a
know.
constant, and that's not bad. That's just what humans do.
Yeah.
But the more my spirituality for me has become more and more about doing less and less, actually.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, doing less. It's so hard to not do.
Totally.
Yeah. I was working with this lady and she keeps trying to tell me not to do, but I'm like, how do I get to, I'm working with this lady that's talking about doing the inner nurturing, like go within. It's like, oh honey, what's here? That self sort of mothering thing. But when we get on these calls and she's like, take your hand, I'm a how? Give me,
Mm.
is there a homework assignment that you can give me to, this is what I'm always asking her. Okay, what do I do? How do I how do I how do I let go? Letting go is very hard.
Letting go is extraordinarily hard. It's actually, I think, a phrase that's a lot more useful is letting it be.
Oh, that's good. Let it
Because
be,
letting
not
it
let
go
go.
assumes it's going to leave, right? And so a lot of times there may be something we have the intention of letting go of, and we sort of, you know, we do the best we can to let go, and we're like, well, it's still here. It's still here. So at that moment, then
Mm,
it's like, well, all right, let it be. Here it
let it
is.
be.
Let
Yeah.
it. So no, I totally understand what you're saying. I am a doer by nature. I am a
Achievement junkie.
Totally. And
Yeah.
so for me, it's been more and more. It's not that I turn that part of myself off. It's not that I have to not do it, but I have to have another way to relate to the world that's not only what am I accomplishing, what am I getting done? And even that accomplishing isn't all, I mean, that's not a negative. I don't say that in
Oh
a
no,
negative
I
way,
yeah.
but it really is about, is there another way to relate to the world that isn't through that lens? And it just takes a lot of, I mean, for me, it's just taken a lot of training, a lot of,
Training, conditioning.
just continuing to try,
Try. Yeah.
continuing to spend some time each day where I try to not strain at things.
Struggling and striving. It's my favorite thing to do, apparently. I love it. Well, this has been so helpful, and I'm so excited for your class and to either introduce you to my listeners or reintroduce. I'll have to find out what the show link number was and put that in the show notes. I'll put that in the show notes along with the link to the whenyouFeed.net/live. Easy peasy to
Easy
remember.
peasy. That's right.
Easy peasy. This has been so helpful. Thank you so much. And I really look forward to speaking with you again.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on. It's always great to talk to you, and it's great to see you thriving.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.